If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to Tatooine Sons, a Star Wars podcast, the only fan podcast to name a canon Star Wars creature and to be endorsed by the writer and director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. Get ready to explore a galaxy far, far away, across the generations. Here is your host, David the Bow-Tie Jedi Guy, with a special presentation of his appearance on the streaming Star Wars network.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
All right. If you thought that Star Wars was just for kids, it's time to think again, because Andor has proven that the galaxy far, far away has stories that resonate very deeply with a more mature audience. And this episode of Tatooine Sons is actually a reshare from when I had the honor to join Pete Fletzer and Nick Mielke on the streaming Star Wars Network's Road to Rebellion, the Andor Aftershow. And we were joined by Colton Ogburn from Screen Crush and Becca Benjamin from Tarkin's Top Shelf to really dissect every thrilling moment of Andor Season 2. This episode you're about to hear, it really isn't a recap of the season. It's much more than that. It's a very thoughtful exploration into what makes this series so special. It's going to look at all of those gut-wrenching moments, like Marva's speech and everything that happened with Bix and Clea, all of that. It's going to look at the unsung heroes of the rebellion. We leave no stone unturned. So get ready to relive the excitement. We're going to debate character arcs. We're going to ponder the future of Star Wars storytelling. This episode really isn't one for younglings. Instead, it's reminding us that the Force is strong with adults too. So stay tuned because this adventure is just beginning. This is Tatooine Sons.
Droid, please.
Well, now that the season has ended and we've seen all 12 episodes of Season 2 of Andor, we're going to be taking a look back at the series and ahead to some of the impact of the Star Wars franchise.
We are going to do that, and it's very important that you hear me say this part right here. Before we dive in, we do want to give you a full spoiler warning, and I mean Season 1, I mean Season 2, I mean Rogue One. I mean, if you're here, if you're watching this and you haven't seen Rogue One or any of the other things, hit pause, check it all out, get completely caught up, and come back. We will be here. We will wait for you, but we don't want to spoil it for you because we're going to talk about all of it.
That's right. And each week on Road to Rebellion, Nick and I have unpacked the story, the characters, the big moments, the little details, and everything in between. But this week, Nick, we are joined by our own band of rebels, friends of the show, who will be here to help build out our panel.
That is correct, and I'm very excited about this. The first person we're going to introduce is no stranger to our network and the shows we do. She is an expert on all things Star Wars literature, one of the hosts of Tarkin's Top Shelf, which is the best Star Wars book podcast out there. I'm excited to welcome back our friend, Becca Benjamin. Becca, what's up?
Hey, Becca.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Hey.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. And, of course, you have seen our next guest breaking down your favorite shows as part of the Screen Crush YouTube channel. We've mentioned Screen Crush on our show to go find them for the Easter eggs. My Innie has had the great honor of working with him on the Screen Crush Severed Floor. Please welcome Colton Ogburn. Colton, how are you?
Hey, my Innie tells me great things about your Innie, Pete, so I'm glad that we can meet up on the outside here. Yeah.
Your Outie likes to watch Star Wars.
And last but certainly not least is a podcasting and Star Wars veteran. He and his sons have created the ultimate family pop culture podcast, and they even have a porg that is named in Star Wars canon. I'm excited to welcome back our friend, Mr. David Jesse. David, what's up?
Oh, man, I'm so excited to be here talking about this crazy series. What an ending last night, or a couple nights ago.
Yeah, oh my gosh. It was it was a heck of a show, and that's actually a great way to start. So each week, Nick and I would start by sharing our first impressions of the arc of the week. But now that we've seen the entire series, I want to ask what your impressions were of season 2. And Becca, I want to start with you. What are your overall impressions of Andor season 2?
Well, it all goes back to 2016 for me, and I'm just going to say, just like I did after walking out of the theater of seeing Rogue One, because I always said Rogue One was the one Star Wars story I never knew I needed. Yeah. And watching both seasons of Andor just solidifies that for me. So that's where I'm at with this.
Yeah, it's true. And Nick and I say it all the time. We're like, Kenobi, we don't need that show. Oh, my gosh, I'm glad we got it. But Rogue One, you're 100% right, was one of those that I was like, we got it in the opening crawl. We know what happens. That's fine. And it has turned into really, I think, 24 hours plus 2 hours, like a full day worth of story at this point that we didn't know we needed and has flushed out the galaxy in such an amazing way. Colton, what are your thoughts on your response to Andor season 2?
Oh, well, like season 1, it's definitely, I'd say, the best Star Wars we've gotten since Revenge of the Sith, probably since Return of the Jedi. I mean, it's top tier storytelling. It's a sector of the Star Wars universe that I always wanted them to explore. Like, I want to see them in the literal trenches of the rebellion, and that's what Andor has given us. And, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about this as we go, but it's a big galaxy. There's room to tell all different kinds of stories in this universe. And I'm hopeful, and I don't want them to like beat a dead horse or overdo it, but I'm hopeful that Gilroy will maybe do something else, like maybe something in the First Order realm, or, you know, tell a story like that.
Yeah, I had this concept on my way home today on the train. I was thinking, maybe he could do like the many Bothans died stories. That way we keep Mon Mothma. She's so great. I'd love to see more of that. But then, you know, that would be beating the dead horse. I think you could easily make a case that would be just doing the same thing again. But so no, but I want to go right back for sure. Yeah. And David, what's your takeaway after the first, or after the season 2?
Yeah, you know, when we finished watching season 1 and we were recording our podcast and talking about it, I said that it's one of the most amazing television shows that I've ever seen, and I feel the same way about season 2 and the entire series as a whole. The challenge that I've always had with it is what Star Wars is for me, right? And Star Wars for me has always been about things like the mythology and the Force and the Jedi and the Sith and those types of things. And so I've struggled a little bit with this series, absolutely loving it, but wondering if it feels as much as Star Wars as I wanted. I've had to let this series, every time we watch an episode in season 1 or an arc in season 2, just sit for a little bit longer and think about it and process it. And that's the kind of, whether or not it's Star Wars or anything else in entertainment media, anything that makes me stop and process and think about what I'm watching a little bit more deeply is amazing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, as you were saying, that it struck me that it's rare for a season 2 to be as good as season 1. I mean, maybe not rare, but it's hard to keep that streak going, right? And so not only, I think season 2 was better for me. I think just maybe it was because of the way it was delivered, or maybe it was because there was a little more action, or I don't know. For whatever reason, it was better for me, and I loved season 1 as well. So it was kind of interesting that the fact that it can be so continuous, and I think just about all of us have probably at least watched a scene or two from Rogue One since it ended, and you're just, I can't believe it makes the connection so very well. So, which again, a testament to Tony Gilroy. Nick, what about you? What were your first impressions?
I have two very specific takeaways. The first one is, like we have said way too many times, for something that we didn't know we needed or we didn't ask for, this story is a certain point of view story from one of the certain point of view books, because it's, hey, here's a little bit of a thing about how did we get the plans to the Death Star. Let's make it a movie, so we made it Rogue One. But then we went, but let's dig into that some more. And so we took a moment. And the one I love so much from certain point of view is the argument that Han and Leia are having in the hallway in Hoth, and the guy that comes through in between the two of them while they're having the argument. We wrote a story about that. But we took that, and like you said, we blew it up into 2 seasons of prestige TV and an incredible movie. So that's the first thing that I love about it so much. The other thing is, and I'm going to pander just for a brief second to our good friend Matt from Enid, Oklahoma, because if there's one thing I have asked for a very long time, is I said, where is my West Wing Star Wars? Because the West Wing is my favorite TV show of all time. Andor is our West Wing Star Wars. Aaron Sorkin didn't write it, but it's on that level. It plays at that level, and it gives me I want the machinations of the Senate. I want the things that are going on behind the scenes. I want the conversations. I want the little tiny moments that lead to the spark of rebellion, and this gives it to us in spades. So I couldn't be happier. And as somebody who's a fan of those two properties, I didn't know they would ever run into each other, but here we are. Looking at that now, we've talked about kind of what are our reactions, what are, to season 2 as a whole. I want to expand that lens a little bit, and I want to ask our panel, and I'm going to start with Colton first. Colton, now that we've seen season 1, you've seen season 2, we've gone through this whole journey with these two, how does it change not only how you view Rogue One, which obviously it backs right up into, but what does it do for your kind of view of the Star Wars canon overall to have Andor season 1 and 2 as a part of your knowledge of Star Wars now?
Well, to Pete's point, I actually haven't had a chance to watch Rogue One or any scenes or anything since finishing Andor. I look forward to actually doing that and seeing. In fact, I might watch that last episode one more time and then go into Rogue One, because I'm sure that it ties in great. In terms of how it makes me look at the saga as a whole, I mean, I think it was always kind of clear. I have actually recently gone back and watched A New Hope somewhat recently, and you can tell in that first one, Luke, Han, and Leia, they feel like they're, very important characters on this mission. But it's very well, established that there is this whole other, thing that's been going on that predates them. A lot of the groundwork for that ultimate, Luke blowing up the Death Star, you can tell just by watching that movie without needing to have seen Rogue One or Andor. There are a lot of people who have given their lives for this rebellion. It feels, like an old aged universe. And so I'm just glad that Andor has finally explored and shined some light on that wing of Star Wars. In terms of how it fits with the saga as a whole, I would think that somebody, obviously, if you're a big original trilogy fan, you're going to, I think, like Andor. But also, I would think that anybody who's a prequel stan would really enjoy Andor, because that's something that Lucas really got into with the prequels, was the politics of it all, the trade routes, and the Senate debate. This Andor is exploring the type of stuff that I wish Lucas could have got a chance to have a little bit more say with what went down in the Clone Wars and all that. I mean, you can't exactly I guess go that dark in Clone Wars, which is where he got to explore the prequel era even more. So I'm glad that Andor went there, and I'd really love to hear Lucas's thoughts on Andor. At least I think I want to hear Lucas's thoughts on Andor, unless they're not great, then maybe I don't. But yeah, I thought it was great.
I love that, and I think that you hit something really specific, because I thought about this as you were speaking. With the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith just being in the last couple of weeks, and with that getting a re-release in the theaters, we've had it on multiple times over that weekend that it came out at my house, and it was really timely for that to be on while Andor was on, because you get a lot of Imperial Senate stuff in Revenge of the Sith, and heading into the end and eventually the dissolution of the Senate, certainly farther down the line.
Well, and they're the two darkest Star Wars stories ever told. Yep. And that's why it's so funny that you see this, like, you know, like some people arguing online, you know, that say they don't like Andor, but, you know, they go like crazy over Revenge of the Sith. Like me too. I love Revenge of the Sith.
Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, I'm like, that's like the darkest Star Wars movie ever made. Like, it pushed a lot of boundaries, and that's what I love about it. That's why I like Andor. So I don't really know what you're going on about. I won't get into that.
Absolutely. David, what about you? As we widen this lens out and we look at, you know, Rogue One certainly coming out of these two seasons of TV, but also kind of just the Star Wars picture as a whole, how does it put it into place for you?
A realization came to me in the second half of season 2 here of Andor. And I think maybe Pete and I were messaging back and forth a little bit about this a couple of weeks ago. What I had to come to terms with was that we all believe this. Everybody on this panel is like, they're the good guys in the Star Wars fan community, right? We all believe Star Wars is for everyone, and we do this. But Star Wars is for everyone, and yet there is a very different style of Star Wars that's coming out in different properties right now. And what I had to come to terms with, going back to what I said a few minutes ago, you know, where Star Wars for me may be much more mythology and much more Jedi and lightsabers and those types of things. This is just as much Star Wars. And for people like Colton and some others, you know, they're finding what they've what you said with the West Wing, right? You're finding what you really love in the Star Wars franchise. And that became, when I came to terms with it, it's not always going to be the Skywalker saga. It's not always going to be about the Force and those types of things, even though we got that little taste of it in the third arc of this, which was absolutely wonderful. It's actually what makes this, it gives me a lot of hope for the future of the franchise.
Would you say a new hope?
We can see it. Yeah, I did.
Damn it, Pete. I was going to say it. I didn't want to interrupt.
I'm out of practice, okay? Yeah, it does. It gives me hope for what this franchise can be, because we can come out with stories like Andor. We can come out with stories like The Acolyte, which is a very different feel to it. And there are people that really didn't like it. And there is a fan base that absolutely loved The Acolyte. And we have, you know, Ahsoka and those types of shows as well, which I loved Ahsoka, right? And with it. So we're going to see Star Wars be a playground that fans that like lots of different styles of shows and movies are going to be able to have a place to play in.
I love that. And I want to throw it, same question to you, Becca, talking about, you know, putting it in perspective, not only for Rogue One, but for the Star Wars canon, but also because you are a resident book expert, you get to put another spin on it that, you know, I'm certainly not conversant in. I can speak for Pete and say that we're terrible about the books. We want to be better, but we're not. So for you, after seeing Andor season 1 and 2, how does that paint Rogue One for you? How does it paint some of the books and things that, you know, inform, you know, the story that we've gotten, as well as just kind of the bigger picture on the whole Star Wars canon?
Well, to echo what everyone else has kind of been saying, I mean, if you look at the deleted scenes especially from the Senate in Attack of the Clones, specifically right after the assassination attempt on Padme, which, you know, she yells, and of course this is deleted. She's very forceful, which reminds me a lot of what we get to see on Mon Mothma when she takes the Senate, you know, takes the stage, center stage, and she's saying, this is Padme in the deleted scene, she's saying, wake up, senators, you must wake up. She's shouting this at the top of her lungs, letting them know something's not right here. Something is amiss. And I really wish a lot of that stuff would have been kept in, especially in Revenge of the Sith. Thankfully, in the novelization of Matthew Stover, that stuff is extended. The whole moment when they're in the pod together, Padme Amidala and Bail Organa, and she says, this is how liberty dies. She actually turns to him, not fully around, but turns to him, and she says, you know, do all those things that we can't talk about. Promise me. She says, vote for Emperor Palpatine. Make Mon Mothma do it too. do everything. So she's already planting those seeds. You guys got to follow through. And what the beauty of Andor is that it's really about people who know they're not going to be around. They've already sold into the cause where we're doing this for the next generation and the generation after that. They're giving up everything for that, as Luthen said in season 1. I mean, it's foreshadowing what we're going to see in the very final clip is that we're doing this, we're sacrificing everything for a sunrise I will never see.
We'll never see.
And even Padme Amidala knew that in Revenge of the Sith. All the way back then, she knew. That's why she went off to Mustafar to confront Anakin. She knew it was a lost cause. That's why it took her so long to even get out of the ship. She knew she wasn't going to make it back on. I just think it's beautiful that we get this, and it all begins with her. We can't forget that Padme is the one who serves the petition of 2000 to Emperor Palpatine to basically give over his emergency powers back to the Senate. She planted it. Mon Mothma follows through, Bail Organa follows through, and everybody else. I mean, Cassian, as they said, he's a gatherer. He's been gathering so he can deliver this message. The Force works in mysterious ways, not to sound cliche, but everybody involved in this has some sort of part to play. Otherwise, it won't come through. So I think if you really sum it up with the novelizations, what Tony Gilroy and company did with Andor is on par with the lyrical prose that Matthew Stover put into Revenge of the Sith. It's that type of writing, and it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, we have the best dialogue and monologues in Andor that we have in any other Star Wars, and I'm just being honest. Not to mention, because I am the only one sitting here that's a woman, we have the best women characters in this series. And not to mention, most of them are moms. They're moms. These moms are written tremendously. And what does, I'm sorry, there's nothing better than a mother's love, a mother's nurturing. And this is what Mon Mothma gives, not to her own specifically, but to everybody else.
Right.
Bix, you get it from Clea in her own way. And I mean, Clea, MVP.
I want to get everybody's opinion on Dedra, because it's like Anakin, right? Horrible things they've done, but they come from and there's no excuse for any of the horrible things they've done. But then you look at the way Dedra was treated, and you look at it from a purely, and this is why I want to get your opinion first on it, Becca, because she's physically abused at work, right? I mean, by her boyfriend on Gorman, and by Orson Krennic. He literally grabs her by the throat and puts her down in her chair and says, "We'll be fine without you." And she has her story. I started to feel bad for her in her story a little bit when she was talking about she's always had to be a scavenger. And I thought of all the women who've had to work a little bit extra hard to get ahead at work, and it doesn't get recognized. And when they do something and it does get recognized, sometimes it's downplayed. What was your overall feeling on Dedra? Because I agree, there were other fantastic female characters, but Dedra was playing it in a very different side, I think.
Oh, yeah. No, Denise is a fabulous actress. What she was able to portray, just even without words, the shaking of the hand, the pulling down her uniform and the collar, like you feel that. But first and foremost, she is written to be a bad person. She is a bad person. Period. Regardless of what's happened to her, she has always made bad choices because of she's a product of her upbringing. Okay. She was raised, as she claims, in an imperial kinderblock. We had what we needed, so she's already brainwashed, in a sense. I'm using that because that's what it is. She's brainwashed to believe this is the way of life. This is the right way. So yeah, she did have to scavenger, but see, somewhere along the line before this unfolded the way it did, it should have clicked. It doesn't click until she's in that cell that, oh my gosh, I completely fudged up.
Yep.
Like that's when it clicks that she realizes she's been on the wrong side all this time.
Yeah.
Because even Krennic tells her, he calls her out, you missed your calling. You should have been a
rebel spy. She should have been a rebel spy. Yep.
So yeah, again, the acting by Denise was just phenomenal. But again, it's hard for me to have some sense of sympathy when I know she's done. I mean, I know you put her on the same, I guess, scale as Anakin, but see, I don't see that.
I mean, that's a little bit of an extreme, to be fair, but yeah.
That is, and I'm not justifying him because he did horrible things. There's no justifying that.
Right.
But when Anakin was Anakin, he was good. He was a good person.
Right. She was never good.
Yeah.
Right.
No, she was never good.
Right. True.
Sorry.
Cole, do you have any thoughts on Dedra as a character?
Well, I mean, you just have to keep in mind that this is a war, and a war, and I think Andor showed this great, there are not many good guys. Both sides are going to do horrible things, and they might acknowledge that they're horrible, or maybe they're brainwashed enough to think, oh, well, it's justified. I think you'll see that on both sides of a war. I think they show that great in Andor. I mean, we have to keep in mind that the rebels, I mean, they're terrorists. I mean, I'm on their side, but they're terrorists. Yeah. And they're doing things that are morally gray, or maybe just, clear, like, hey, that's immoral, but I'm doing it for a sunrise I'll never see. So I like that they gave us a little bit of that conflict with her character. In terms of, like, I love, to your point about her being a woman in this galaxy. And yeah, sure, the Star Wars galaxy is probably a little bit more progressive in terms of acceptance. But I mean, it's been clearly established, like, in the canon, and I know, New Hope was made back in the 70s, and that, of course, had something to do with it. But, and as we see in Andor, you'll see that all the top-ranking, Imperial people are, white guys. So I think it makes sense that in canon we can assume that it is hard for a woman to climb those ranks. We've seen the Empire is very prejudiced toward non-humans. That's a part of that galaxy. So yeah, I think they handled her character really well. Stellar performance. I was gonna grab it, but I think it's across the room. I actually just picked up her vintage collection figure. Great figure. Yeah.
See, you're doing your part. That's good. David, do you have any thoughts on Dedra?
Well, this is something that has been said in so many different ways for different characters throughout the decades, that the best villains are the ones that think that they're the good guy, and that's the beauty of Dedra, right? She never once doubts her righteousness throughout this, even to the extent of being willing to break Imperial Security Bureau protocol in order to go after Luthen when she's been told not to. She's not supposed to be going after Axis. Now she's going to arrest him. She's been continuing to do this. She's exactly the overstepping that the rebellion needed to be successful. Her coming in there, making all of those mistakes, opened up. If she doesn't do that, then Rogue One doesn't exist, and what we see in A New Hope doesn't exist. And that was such a beautiful way of setting her character up, because you love her and you hate her, and you understand her throughout both seasons of this. And Denise did an amazing.
And I think that's actually one of the things that Andor did as a series incredibly well was. And they did it without introducing Vader and the Emperor. The bad guys are bad guys that you love to hate, like every single one of them. And so speaking of which, David, let me go to you. Nick and I every week would pick our MVP. So I'm going to take Cassian off the table because it's named after him. It's the name of his show. But let's take him off the table. Who is your MVP of the series? Who... and define that however you like, but who was the character that you walked away from this series with the most feelings for in one way or another?
It was really interesting how, if you would have asked me this question because I'm in Central Time, so this show comes on at 8 p.m. If you would have asked me this question at 7:45 p.m. Tuesday evening, my answer would have been very different. I did not really get into Clea as a character. I thought she was kind of like, why do we even have her in this show? She's just there to have to play off of Luthen, with it. And I came out of the series thinking, oh wait, so Luthen really wasn't the hero that put the rebellion together. Clea was the hero that put the rebellion together. right? Because what Luthen is doing is as a way to his own weird, twisted way, in my opinion at least, of trying to redeem himself for the absolute horrible things that he did to her family and her planet and her people. And when he finds her, it becomes real to him about what he's doing. And he makes it his mission to rescue her and to be a part of her life and to protect her. And she's the one that's pushing for what we see on Naboo. I believe it's been established that
we can all agree it was Naboo.
Naboo. We see all of these moments. She's the one constantly pushing. And then when you look back, season 1, season 2 of Andor, it's always her. She's resolved. She knows what she's doing. She's calling Luthen out. She's calling Mon out. She's calling Val out. All of them, because she needs to keep this rebellion going forward. And so the beautiful thing about her ending, it goes back to a lot of the things that we've been talking about with the way that they wrap up the stories and with it. She's the type of woman that is so confident in who she is that she doesn't have to get the credit. Which most of the strongest women I know are like that. Right? They let us weak, insecure men get the credit for all of the stuff, while they're the ones that make it happen behind the scenes. And that's exactly what's going on with her. So Clea is without a doubt my MVP.
It's great. And Becca, I feel like you're in the same boat as David, or maybe not, but certainly sharing the same concept on that one character for sure.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I can't thank everyone that made Andor enough, because I feel seeing the whole hospital, the whole scrubs, like, yay! Sorry. But anyway, going back to Clea, it's really interesting because I haven't really heard too many people saying this, but it's like, does anyone not see the parallels here? Luthen and Clea are exactly Saw and Jin, okay? Both little girls were, in a sense, had these surrogate fathers, not because they wanted them, but because they had to. Saw raised Jin to be this martyr, to be this weapon. And he left her at the age of 16 because people were gaining interest in the Urso connection. So he leaves her alone with nothing but a knife on a mission. Okay, at 16. Then you get Clea, like you said. She's good at disguise, good at being the decoy. Look at what she did at that whole thing with Lonnie. Oh my gosh, she's just incredible. I mean, it still strikes me that Tony did this and he gave this parallel to the Jin and Saw scenario. This is exactly what this is, only Luthen doesn't leave her when things get too hard. Things don't get too messy. He actually tells her, I will do the burn, because he knows that if she stays behind, it's going to be her. He sacrifices himself for her. Let's also say this also meshes well, because you just recently watched Rogue One. When they decide that they're going to go to Scarif, and Jin is so taken aback by it, she goes, I'm not used to people sticking around when things go bad, because Saul left her. What does he say, Cassian? Welcome home.
Yeah, welcome home.
Because, I mean, it's just, again, not to be cliche, but the Force works in mysterious ways. Because he's gathering. He has to gather Jin, because without Jin, there is no message from the messenger. There it is. It's just, Clay is awesome.
I love that connection. I did not get I didn't see it the first time until you just said it. The connection with the Saw Jin parallel, and that's a really good pickup. What about you, Colton? Was there an MVP for you?
Krennic. No, I'm just kidding. I made this comparison recently. I don't know if you guys have seen Better Call Saul. That's a show that it's named after one character, but it's just as much a story about this other character, Mike Ehrmantraut, and their two stories run parallel for a long time. Like, they don't really cross paths, and then eventually they'll cross paths for a little bit, and then they go completely separate again. And I think that that's what they did perfectly with Andor. That this show could have just as easily been called Mon Mothma, and I think that she's the MVP of this show. I love her character. I want to see more of her, in a post Return of the Jedi, story. Like, I want them to do like a story that takes place after Return of the Jedi, recast the original 3 and have her there, show her becoming the Chancellor and all that. Her calling a genocide what it is, her, taking this fight to Palpatine, calling him out in the Senate, willing to leave her family and all that behind. I think that she is a standout for this show.
And I think I'll add to that, there's 2 things that struck me about Mon Mothma, and they both happened in the last couple episodes, the last 2 arcs. One was the way Genevieve O'Reilly played her when Cassian shot people right in front of her. You realize, oh shit, she's never really seen that part. She's read about it, she's gotten reports on it, but she's never seen that. And then the second part, which I thought was so great, was her just eating breakfast with all the troops. She was just one of the rebels, and explains she had to walk away from Chandrilla with all the fancy hairstyles and everything, and she's living with the troops. She's living in the dirt with the troops, and that says a lot about a leader, I think. So,
and that again ties perfectly into how Andor's, we've been saying it's just one aspect of the type of story you can tell in Star Wars, and then you see the same thing within the show itself, because you see different kinds of stories being told through Andor and then through Mon. It's perfect. It's perfect. And with her reaction to him shooting, that's this great like crossover point where you realize, oh, they've been on 2 pretty different paths, but going on the same mission, which I think is how this show ties in perfectly to the whole saga.
Nick, who's your MVP?
It's the favorite child question, and it's not really fair to ask who is your favorite character, who's your MVP, because there are so many aspects of just how well written, how many layers there are to this show. But if I'm going to be forced to pick somebody besides Krennic, obviously, I'm going to go with Bix. And we've talked already about strong women. There's no secret I'm a fan of strong women. I live in a house full of them. But this is a character who, despite the trauma that she went through, not only in season 2, but in season 1, the torture, the loss, all the things that she experienced, to have the inner fortitude and the strength that she had when presented with the opportunity to go, let's just get out of here. Let's run away. We don't have to be here anymore. To know that Cassian was needed and to say, I'm going to go because you won't if I'm here. Like, again, sacrificing for the rebellion. The decisions, so much of this show has been about sacrifice. What Mon Mothma sacrificed with her personal life, her career, her family. All of the characters, Clea, Luthen, you can go all the way down the line. Even with Cyril and Dedra and all these other, the Imperial characters, the personal sacrifices that are made in this show you how personal something like rebellion can be. And for Bix to make the choices she made, and just like, Luthen's speech, she sacrificed her happiness for a bigger thing. And it's so powerful and it's so strong. And then to see how that pays off at the end of the show, and to kind of have that little, we said it on the episode review that we did, that kind of pseudo Sopranos moment when she's on that planet standing there holding that baby and turns and looks and has that little smile. What are we looking at there? Who may have swung by for just a minute before they went to, the Rings of Kafrene? I don't know. But if I'm picking an MVP, it's Bix, and it's because of the strength that she constantly pulled from in order to pull herself out of the trauma that she went through, the ways that she had to deal with it, whether it was the drugs, whether it was, getting the revenge, getting Dr. What's-His-Face and, blowing up that building and the whole deal. Like, that it's incredible. And I was rooting for her all along the way, but to see how that story and that journey went was really inspiring. As we look at this, we've kind of talked about the seasons. We've talked about all of this. They did something new with Andor season 2. We didn't get this before, and I want everybody's perspective on it. I'm going to throw it to you first, David. We got 3 episodes a week for 4 weeks. We got a Star Wars movie a week for 4 weeks. Did you like it? Did it work for you? Give me your thoughts on, how this new change in consuming some Star Wars content worked for you.
Well, first of all, I love the creativity of it, right? Because for years in this space, I've been podcasting with Sam and Nate for almost 8 years now. Yeah. The debate was always the binge version of these releases or the week-to-week version of this. And that we never once saw the opportunity for something like this. And so I felt like it was the perfect sweet spot, at least for this series. With it, because of the way that they told these stories, these arcs, with it 1 year at a time, and it allowed there to be a chance to step back and breathe and think through what happened with some of these arcs and speculate. And so for all of us, doing YouTube videos, all of us doing podcasting and things like that, we need that space, right? It's a lot easier to talk about this series than it would be Stranger Things when it comes out 8 episodes at once with it. And so, we got that opportunity, but at the same time, it allowed. One of the criticisms of the first season was after that first 3 episode arc, it was pretty much week to week, and it took a while. I'm thinking of the prison arc as well. Being sort of broken up with that. That would have been more impactful having been told all at once. And for for some of us, I think we could, if you got screeners, some of us got screeners, and we got to see that arc all at once, and it made a bigger impact for us that way. We got to experience that and see the entire world experience this series that way. I absolutely loved it.
Cool. Yeah. Becca, what about you? How did 3 a week work for you?
Well, to echo again, I mean, I'm a long time fan. I'm old, so I'm used to waiting 3 years in between a movie, or in between 83 and 1999 to get another movie. So this was a lot. I felt like I had ADHD for a minute there. Thankfully getting screeners does help with that, because I didn't have to stay up late on a work night. I was able to, I mean, and I hate to say that. I mean, I'm very grateful that I had that, but I actually like the rollout, because I feel like if you wait a week in between an arc like that, any of them, even though they show you those recaps, it's not enough. I mean, again, I'm 50 now. So, what I retain week to week is not the same as I would have 10 years ago. So I like it. I think they should do this more often, because, again, it's like getting that film. And I think we've been longing for that for a long time, because the last time we had a new Star Wars film, in the theater was 2019. And when you say that, so long ago.
So long ago.
So long ago.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, Colton, I'm going to ask you the same question. I'm going to pose it even just a tiny bit different. I know for me, if you give me something week to week, great. I'll watch it week to week. I'll process it. I'll think about it. I'll rewatch it, 1, 2, 3 times, depending on what it is. But I also know if you give it to me all at once, I'm going to watch it all at once, because I'm like, it's right there. It's waiting for me. You're somebody who creates content. You comment on shows. You do a lot of this stuff. How did it work for you getting these 3 episodes a week that kind of fit in this arc mode?
Well, it's like if you have a whole cake in your fridge, you're going to eat it, but then you're not going to feel great after. And then a few days later, you're going to wish the cake was still there. But
there's a reason they call it binging, right?
Like every day. Yeah. Okay. I'm of 2 minds of it. There's my mind that's, my job. And of course, it would be much easier, better for us, like workflow wise, view wise, keep it going longer, to have had like 12 weeks of 1 episode per week coverage. That would have been better for our business model. Ignoring that, just as a fan, I love binging stuff too. Like I said, with the cake, if there's a cake in my fridge, it's gone. So yes, if it's there, I'll binge the whole thing. But there is something so fun about, and I know it's frustrating, like when there's a cliffhanger. Like right now, I've been catching up on Last of Us, and I'm caught up now, and I'm like, I want more. And so I kind of spoiled myself on that. But I like, and I think it's better for the show itself if you keep that conversation going and having like those water cooler conversations. I think it gets the word out about the show better. That's why I'm glad Netflix finally, with Stranger Things, at least split the season in 2, drop the first half, then the second half, so you can get some word of mouth. Because I think when you just drop it all at once, that's not good for how we do videos. I also just don't think it's good for the show itself. Andor kind of did kind of walked that middle line. They didn't drop it all at once, but they did 3 arcs or 4 arcs, right? 3 episodes each.
Yep.
I guess it's fine because if that's how they plan to do it from the jump, then to quote George Lucas, it's stylistically designed to be that way, but we can diminish the effects of it. Did anybody get that prequel documentary line? I personally wish that they had done it episode by episode. I'm a big advocate for if you are not a sitcom, a cartoon, or a spaghetti western, I want your shows to be at least an hour long. And I want 1 a week. That's how I think that was the perfect model. I think it's proven that was the perfect model, like with Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, Succession. You look at the most recent shows that are all in that same genre, I think, as Andor, and that's the model for releasing them. So as cool as it is to get a Star Wars movie every week, I do wonder if they would have had even more like word of mouth success had they cut the show a little differently and released 1 episode a week. That would be my preference.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Pete, you and I have talked about this off and on throughout when it was announced. Throughout the course of this, we were also lucky enough to get the screeners, and I think honestly it helped us with busy lives and trying to do shows and that kind of thing, so it worked out. Where do you ultimately end up on the 3 episode a week situation?
I think it was great for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think it was one of the things that I noticed, especially when we would break them down. I noticed that episode 2 of each arc left you in a place. It was kind of a down show, other than the Gorman Massacre, but it was kind of a down moment before going into the launch. So you would have to wait a full week after coming out of something that, which is why I think releasing the first 3 episodes of season 1, they did it the way they did it. However, I would do something a little bit different, and Colton, I think you sort of leaned into this a little bit when you were talking about the way Stranger Things did things. I would have gotten 4 months of subscriptions out of it. I would have done 1 a month. Like maybe the first Tuesday of the month, I would have dropped it. Arc 1, Arc 2, Arc 3, because that does a couple things. It'll keep people talking about it for that next month. It keeps your subscription. I mean, I hate to just put on the business hat, but the reality is you need only 2 months for this show. If you had 4, you would stick around. But I also think it would give people that opportunity to, after you watched, Solo or Rise of Skywalker or whatever, you had that opportunity to talk about it, and it gave people some time to catch up, and so I think that would have been a little bit better. I don't know if it would have been better, but it would have been a different way to do it, and I think it would have been an interesting way to experiment.
I think we're also at a point where there is so much, especially just Disney alone. They're putting out so much stuff, which great, but I feel like a lot of people are getting to a point where they feel like they just do not have time to watch everything. It feels like homework. Like, I need to binge 3 hours of this show before I can watch this next week's episode. Right. So I can see that being a problem. And can I just say, I think I kind of brushed over this in my point about like if you're not a spaghetti western, a sitcom, or a cartoon. My point to that is, I love that we are actually getting hour-long episodes and not that 22-minute, you don't account for credits stuff. So I want to praise Andor for that as well, for actually giving us real TV.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, the 36-minute episodes are like, oh no, stop.
Yeah, and half of it's credits.
Wait a minute. Let's take a slightly different direction here, and let's talk about, there were some unanswered questions and some plot points that were left open. I don't know if any of you had any in particular. I'll leave it, we don't have to do it in any particular order. Does anybody have any unanswered questions that, even knowing what happens in Rogue One and A New Hope, anything that you wish they had answered?
Becca does.
Becca's got one. Hold on. Let's bring it.
What happened to Kaz's sister?
Yeah.
I really want to know where she ended up.
Yep.
That still bugs me. I read the interview. I get it. Tony's like, well, how many things in your lifetime do you leave unresolved? I get that. But this is a sibling. They were close. what.
And they referenced it in the last episode. Like they reminded you
they
that they didn't answer that question.
A little flashback. When K2 was trying to wake him up. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's to show his regret in a sense that he didn't go back, which is why he keeps going back for everybody else, which I can understand that. That's part of his flaw, but he's a human. You know what I mean? He can't leave anyone behind. And I think in a sense, him bringing Clea back was in a way bringing his sister back, even though it's not his sister, if that makes a little sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know, but that bothers me. I don't know. I want to know where she's at. Why show her at all?
Yeah. I think, to play devil's advocate on that, I think the point to that might be, and I agree with you, it would have been nice to know, but that, as we saw with Bix going off, I think the point is Cassian's new family is the rebellion, the actual mission of the rebellion. So I guess, where his sister is kind of becomes, irrelevant. I want to know, about this super weapon. How is the rebellion? Are they going to destroy it? The Palpatine guy, I want to know if they're going to beat him.
Man, I hope they make a sequel, right?
Yeah, I just felt like there was so much unanswered, a lot of setup. We're just seeing the space station be built, and I don't know.
She called it what? A death something? I don't know.
Yeah, which is ridiculous.
At least make a call who called something to close it out.
Yeah, I mean that's a little on the nose. I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe there's it'd be cool if one of the engineers was secretly a rebel or something, and he puts in a failsafe or something to where they could blow it up. But that might be a little much. I don't know.
I've got a movie for you to check out, Colton. When you're done.
A couple of them.
Yeah,
that's right. Recommendations coming your way.
David, were there any unanswered questions for you off the top of your head?
Not necessarily unanswered questions. I would say that one thing that I was really hoping to see flesh out a little bit more was I kind of wanted to see when Galen sends Bodhi to Saw. I kind of anticipated that happening in this last arc. This last arc went in a direction I did not expect at all. And you and I were texting about it earlier today, Pete.
Yeah.
With it. I was like, I really thought we were going down that path coming into Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And was a little bit when are we going to get there? And then it was I realized, oh, wait, we're not. So now I've got to accept the story and kind of get into the story that we're in. And obviously I loved it. I mean, I made Clea my MVP.
Yeah.
With it. I am glad though to go back to the conversation about Cassian's sister. I am so glad that they didn't tie it all up in a pretty bow and give you some big reveal where in the theories about Clea being his sister and all of this. And at one point, it kind of felt like they may be going there, which you kind of referenced a little bit earlier, I think, Nick. But they didn't actually make that happen. And that would have been it would have been too Star Wars. Right? It would have been too...
Everybody's connected
on
to
your
the
father.
Everybody's related.
All of this kind of stuff that's going on. And that's not what this series has been at all. And that needed to not happen. I'm so glad that they didn't make that happen.
Yep. I agree with that.
And I'll say mine kind of ties in similarly to that. As great as it would have been to see Kino Loy pop up somewhere at the end, because again, not dead on screen, not dead wherever. We know you can't swim, but if at the end in a closing shot, he's, ratcheting an X-Wing in the background or something, that would have been great. But at the same time, I'm really glad they didn't do that, because again, you have to be able to have people who come in and out of your life, who come in and out and get you on a path heading in a direction, but they don't necessarily get to go with you on that journey. And so I am glad.
He becomes Snoke, just so you know.
Oh, that's right. See, again, there's a movie down the road for you, Colton. It's all going to tie together. So yeah, I don't think. I just thought that was I'm glad they didn't make that choice. I think it worked better as they did it.
Yep.
I'm just laughing really quick though because he can't swim, but yet we see all the Snokes in a jar with fluid. I'm just sorry. Sorry, I had to. Too soon? Sorry.
But they're not swimming in the jar. Yeah.
It's always
Just floating.
another snow.
Yeah.
Just floating.
It's always too soon.
Cool.
What?
I derailed the whole show.
I'm sorry. No.
No, I did.
You didn't. We're thinking about Snooks in jars and how they're really not swimming. Becca, I do have a question for you. You are our expert in Star Wars literature, in books. Watching Andor, seasons 1 and 2, this is your chance. What are the recommendations for people coming out of Andor 1 and 2 that may not be book people? Because we know there are so many more incredible stories that exist that fill in even more of these gaps, even more of these stories. What would be some of the Tarkin's Top Shelf official recommendations based on watching Andor?
Okay, so these are, again, not in this order necessarily. Okay, so just Rebel Rising. This is the Saw and Jyn Erso story, but, even after he leaves her with a knife at the age of 16 by herself, and how she gets out of that. Very, very cruel, but yet she still has affection towards him. So that just speaks to her moral compass. Yeah, just saying. So there's that. This, absolutely love. This just came out in February. Please get this. This series is going to be phenomenal. This happens right after Revenge of the Sith. It's about the first year and how Bail Organa and Mon Mothma deal with that aftermath, and also they team up with Saw for a little bit. It's really good. This book, when we read this on our podcast, I actually said, there's no way now you cannot have Bail Organa show up in season 2. Like, he needs to. So happy. And Benjamin Bratt, can we just say, awesome.
Yep.
He was
that
great.
One is a must read.
He
was. He had that whole essence of Bail.
Perfect. If you had to replace him, he was perfect. And I think you said it online, and I think it's a great comment. Nobody complained when they changed out Brea for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series.
Thank you.
Why?
I don't know, but
and I love Jimmy Smits, and I love what he did in West Wing. But I think for what Bale needed to do in this series, I think Benjamin Bratt did a better job than Jimmy Smits would have done to be that character the way he played it.
You said the quiet part out loud.
I do. I think he played that part better than Jimmy Smits would, and I love Jimmy Smits, and I loved him as Bale in the earlier stuff. But I think for this show and the tone and everything that it brought to it, because it gave a little bit of that. Even though I know the story, I had little moments where I went, I don't know if I trust him. I'm not so sure he's on our side. He carried it in a way that I don't know that Jimmy Smits could have as convincingly.
Yeah, and I love the line when K2 says, the man that you don't like is here.
Yes.
I absolutely love that.
Yes.
But this one this is the prequel to Rogue One. So it fits before and then even after Andor, if that makes sense. So, because it goes right into Rogue One. And so Catalyst. And then this one, good friend of the show, Chris Kemshaw, Dr. Chris Kemshaw. So, The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire. This is ridiculously amazing. I mean, just ridiculous. And it's just awesome. And it makes me wonder what side Dr. Kemshaw's really on, but no, I'm only teasing. I know what side he's on, but it's that good, and it really it offers a lot of insight to what we see with Dedra and Krennic and why they are the way they are and what makes them all tick, which we kind of get to see, obviously, which is nice for a change. Those are my 4 recommendations.
I've seen that book on shelf, and I've always been attracted to it. Is it a story, or is it just sort of like a history?
It's, okay, so, and of course, he would be very upset with me, Dr. Kemshaw. But the character, have you read Kristen Baver's Skywalker
one?
War?
Yeah.
Yes, it's written like that. So basically, it's a historian telling you the history.
Cool.
So it's written in, someone else's voice, and actually he uses, can't think of his name from Rise of Skywalker. He's the one that basically tells you about, the Sith and their, and that's when Poe says somehow Palpatine has returned, that whole thing, So, but anyway, it's really
somehow Palpatine returned.
Oh, you always have to have that ready,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a book I'm definitely gonna have to pick up for sure. Colton, I'll throw this to you, and we'll start there. But Screen Crush, of course, is without a doubt the place for Easter eggs and things that we might have missed on all of our favorite shows. I now watch your All of Us. Of course, if there's a show I like, you guys have it covered, which is great. Mm-hmm. But while Andor didn't really have as much in-your-face member berries, it did have some here and there. So how do you and the rest of the panel kind of feel about that sort of lack of overt fan servicey cameos? Like, there was plenty of opportunities to show us Vader or planets like Tatooine and Lothal. Do you think I think we would all agree that it helped, but was it noticeable? Did it change the perception? And David, to your point, it's sort of like when Andor first came out, you sort of compared it to pizza, right? Star Wars is like pizza. Everybody's got their favorite toppings, and so, but do you think that there was not enough fan servicey things? Did it feel, maybe the best way to put it is, as a great question to sort of wrap everything up with everybody, is, did it feel Star Warsy enough to you? And I know, David, that's something you've been struggling with, but Colton, where do you start with that?
I mean, to push back a little, I think it feels very like Star Wars. I mean, my Mothma's there, El Organa's there, there's stormtroopers running around. I feel like, as a hardcore Star Wars fan, I'm like, yeah, this is a Star Wars show. Krennic is there. So yeah, I take your point. Like, no, they didn't drop Vader or anything, but I was glad that several times they dropped like Emperor Palpatine. I'm like, all right, nice.
Yep.
I'm not huge on the throwing a character or a reference in for the sake of doing it. I want it to have some meaning and some reason behind it. And I think Andor walks that line great. I mean, I could see how maybe to a more like someone who this isn't their entire life watching Star Wars might be like, hey, where's like, somebody with a lightsaber or something like that. But that's not the point of this show. So I think they handled it well.
Yeah, Nick and I said on the when we covered the last 3-episode arc, if I thought for sure if there was an opportunity, I thought we were going to see Partagaz be brought before Darth Vader. I thought that was going to be his entrance. But if they did that, that's all we would have talked about. We would have missed the rest of those episodes because we would have been so focused on Darth Vader. So I think they handled it perfectly.
I take it back. I want Cassian in the world between worlds talking to Yoda or something.
When he realizes that the Force has driven everything he's done, right? What about you, David? I still that pizza comment has stuck.
Yeah,
with me.
okay. So the idea was you could be at the best pizza restaurant in the world, right? And order cheese bread. And it may be the most amazing cheese bread you've ever had, but it's still not pizza. And that's what I was trying to use as a metaphor for, if this is kind of the way season 1 of Andor felt for me. Again, I've said over and over again how much this series is amazing, right? And I love it. I think that what the third arc of season 2, I finished watching it with Sam and Nate, and we were sitting on the couch. Actually, it was weird. I was sitting on the couch with Nathan, and then Sam was watching it from his new house he just bought. And if you've ever listened to the show, he was 16 when we started the podcast, and now he owns a house, and so it's weird. But anyway, we were watching it, and we were messaging back and forth about it. And I said, this series is to Star Wars. Andor is to Star Wars what the biblical book of Esther is to the biblical canon. Wow. The biblical book of Esther has no mention of God whatsoever anywhere in it. And yet God and his hand moving throughout the narrative is present throughout. And when I saw the Force healer and the things that she said to Cassian in episode 7, and then what Luthen says to Cassian in episode 9 about you're always in the right spot, you're always here.
it's clear that the Force has been guiding Cassian throughout all of this, even though we don't have Jedi, we don't have Sith, we don't have Vader, we don't have lightsabers, we don't have any of that. And I was like, this is actually a brilliant story, because you see the Force moving all throughout Cassian's arc, and you don't have to actually tell everybody that that's what's going on.
I would say it's very show, don't tell.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
That's a great observation. I love that. Becca, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I don't know if you're trying to like get onto like, putting something in there for fan service type thing. But I was just happy, like I said, going back to my book recommendations, that even though Jimmy Smits was not going to be able to make it work, they were brave enough to recast. And I think that needs to happen more.
Yeah.
Okay? Because let's face it, I mean, if we're getting older, that means certain actors are getting older and they're just not going to be there anymore. Some of them aren't even there anymore, but yet their characters are living on in a timeline where it's building and it's going to be necessary. I'm hinting at Leia. Anyway, just saying. But to play off what we were just talking about with the Force, I mean, even in Rogue One, like you said, we don't see Jedi, but yet the Force is a very prominent character.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny because like when you bring up that Force healer and what she says about, now getting clarity on Cassian's path, as this messenger, and he's gathering as he goes, it really brought me back to Rogue One with Chirrut when Baze is like, where are you going? He goes, I'm following Jyn. Her path is clear. I mean, if that's not the Force making sure these two come together to do what they need to do, then I don't know what it is. Yeah. Let's also remember too, Lyra Urso was a member of the Church of the Force, but yet somehow she aligned with Saw Gerrera. Someone make that make sense, right?
Yeah.
So this is the Force at will, because Luthen says to Cassian, because Cassian goes, I've been making all my own choices. He goes, but have you?
Have you?
Somehow you just are where I need you to be. That's the whole thing. Does the Force really give each person free will, or don't you?
Yep.
Have free will. So, yeah, it's really cool.
I love it. And it's funny. It's like, because also in Rogue One, when Chirrut says that he feels like Cassian is in his own cage or something, which actually ties.
You're in your own prison and you carry it with you.
Yep. And so it's a different sort of form of what the Force healer said, right? He's sort of gathering things, and Chirrut sees him as he's gathering things, but it's weighing on him. So that's really cool. So cool. Yes, and I will add to your recasting thing, because I think there was, people were looking for something to complain about, and I will not name the author because I don't know how he'd feel about it. But Nick was with me when we were in. I'll tell you offline, Becca, because you'll probably be able to figure it out. But when we were at Star Wars Celebration in California a couple of years ago, we were sitting with this author, and I asked him. I said, with Carrie Fisher passing away, what would you have done? And he said, I would have recast her. He said, it wouldn't have been popular. He said, but the story outweighs the actor. And I think, Benjamin Bratt proved that this time around. There's a different Dodonna in Rogue One. There's it's you need the character, and the story will, as you pointed out, and it's clear, Star Wars will live far beyond any of us. And if they're going to continue to tell these stories, you need to have the character live on, and you can base it on Carrie Fisher's personality or whatever Mark Hamill brought to Luke Skywalker or whatever that might be, but you need to be able to move on, otherwise the stories can't. So so any parting comments before we go back? I'll start with you. Any parting thoughts on the series or anything?
It's interesting because, again, it enriches what we already know, and I think that speaks volumes to those creators and the actors and actresses that brought this forward, and the whole cast and crew. And I just think, you know, we all need to embrace stories because, like we were just saying about, you know, pizzas and toppings and things like that. I mean, yeah, I'm just not a fan of the comparing. This one is better than that one. This is a masterpiece compared to that. You know, don't yuck somebody's yum. You know, I mean, I don't rank the films. I never will. I just can't. I won't do it. But
we all know Empire's best.
Sure. It's just so dark, gloom and doom, but then again, so is Rogue One. But, you know, hey, you know, I just think it's important that even the little guy gets their story told because, you know, that's what it's about. It's more or less about the people, not so much about the Jedi, if that makes sense. Because they're the ones that are going through it all. And this is where I think Andor is different from everything else because we're just following the little guy trying to make a difference. And I think that makes for an interesting story, and it's more relatable. You know, not all of us can wield a lightsaber or use the Force to open, you know, doors, unless you're, you know, walking into Walgreens or something. But, you know,
Absolutely. David, any parting thoughts on Andor?
I'll go back to what I said earlier towards the very beginning. I love how this show allows us to see a future for Star Wars where you can have very different style stories being told to different types of audiences, and it can actually broaden the galaxy. And it's really interesting how that happens by going very narrow. This series went very narrow. It went very narrow on a handful of people trying to make a difference in this rebellion. But it's opening up the galaxy to being much broader for the future. And I feel really good because of this series. I feel really good about the future of Star Wars. And that's awesome.
That's great. That's great. Colton, what about yourself?
Andor and like Thunderbolts, these are these are great examples of what you can get when you let a writer and a director just make their damn show or movie and don't get too in the weeds, don't interfere too much, give them this general outline. We need to start here, end up here, and just let a talented, creative person with an actual like stellar resume handle this, you know, top tier, like very valuable content. That's exactly what they did here with Andor. And I hope that they can continue that, learn from that, and push it into their other brands as well. I hope to see that with Marvel. And I think we're seeing that with James Gunn, with DC. And there's no reason, you know, I actually was lucky enough to get to see the new Mission Impossible, which comes out, I think, in like a week or two. I got to see it the other night, and the whole time, sorry, I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but the whole time I'm sitting there wondering, you know, because Tom Cruise, say what you will about him, he knows how to make a movie, and he has like this passion for filmmaking, and you can just see that in his movies. You can see it in Andor, and the whole time I was watching Mission Impossible, I was like, why wasn't this Brave New World, the new Captain America movie? Why didn't they go this route? And I felt that with Andor, watching just the quality storytelling they were doing there. I know you guys, you know, I enjoyed Kenobi and Ahsoka to a certain extent as well, but I was wondering, well, why didn't Kenobi and Ahsoka have this same, like, I don't know, just quality? Like Kenobi especially. I wanted this wartime, like PTSD type story that I think that
they went up to a line, but they never went past far enough with it. Yeah.
I wish they'd gone the Andor route with that, and I hope with the great reception they're getting from season 2 that they'll, you know, entertain that idea.
I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us. It has been such a wonderful conversation, a chance to connect with all of you. Everybody's socials will be in the show description, in the links below, so check them out on all the different things they do. Tatooine Sons, Screen Crush, Tarkin's Top Shelf. You can't go wrong with any of those. So thank y'all so much for being a part of this.
You're a rebel now.
Wow. What an incredible conversation, and what an honor to be able to hang out for an hour plus with some of these cool Star Wars people out there. It was pretty amazing. As we discussed this
epic series, Andor. As we wrap up, there are 3 kind of key points that really kind of resonated deeply with me, especially as I think about dads like us who grew up loving Star Wars and are now getting the awesome opportunity to share with our kids. First, Andor reminds us that the heart of Star Wars really does lie in fantastic storytelling, especially about ordinary people that are making extraordinary sacrifices. And this is such a powerful lesson for our kids about courage and about standing up for what's right, even when the odds are against you. Obviously, something that we need to continue to instill in them more than ever now. Second, the series enriches our understanding of this larger saga. Watching Andor really gives us a fresh perspective on Rogue One and the rebellion and things that happened in the prequels that are now impacting in this series, and also what's going to happen in A New Hope and beyond, showing kind of every character, no matter how small, they actually play a very vital role in this fight for freedom. And that's such a beautiful way to teach our children that every action counts. And then finally, Andor challenges us to embrace the complexity of this Star Wars universe. It's not always going to be about Jedi and Sith. There are a lot of other things going on, and there are some really interesting and compelling moral dilemmas that are being faced by those who are fighting for a better future. And this depth of storytelling is something that we can discuss with our kids. We can help them really appreciate these nuances. So I want to thank Pete and Nick for asking me to join them for this breakdown on the streaming Star Wars network. Make sure you check out their show. Each Thursday evening, they go live with some really great interviews and great guests and conversation. It's a very different experience than just another run-of-the-mill Star Wars podcast. So I highly recommend it. If you're a Star Wars book person, you have got to check out Tarkin's Top Shelf. These guys have been doing it with excellence and the right way for even longer than Tatooine Sons, which is hard to believe. We've been doing this for almost 8 years. They've been doing it for a lot longer than that. Becca Benjamin is great. Mark over there. The Tarkin's Top Shelf is a fantastic podcast. You've got to check it out. And then, of course, if you love anything in movie and TV, you probably know about Screen Crush. So check out, obviously, Screen Crush, but also check out Colton Ogburn's personal YouTube. You can just search him, Colton Ogburn. You're going to find him. He's on X and Threads and Instagram and YouTube and all of that. And he does some really, I love Colton specifically, the way he is able to see connections between things and how they relate to the larger story. And it's so much fun. I was watching a video of his just earlier today about Secret Wars and Doomsday and what's going on with that. It's really good. I highly recommend him. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Tatooine Sons. If you enjoyed it, we'd love for you to follow us on social media. You can just pretty much search Tatooine Sons, SONS, on anything. You'll find us. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. We've got a Substack weekly newsletter that comes out for sure. We're trying to keep additional updates on there as we have time. We've been traveling a lot lately, so I haven't had a chance to update it, but some great content there. And until the next time, may the Force be with you. And remember, the stories that we shared today actually inspired the next generation of Star Wars fans.
Thank you for listening to Tatooine Sons, a Star Wars podcast. Please subscribe and follow Tatooine Sons on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. Tatooine Sons regularly publishes thoughtful articles intended to provoke conversation about the larger themes in Star Wars. Go to TatooineSons.com to explore further. And may the Force be with you, always.
This podcast, website, and social media accounts are not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment purposes only. Star Wars, all names and sounds, and any other Star Wars related items and properties are trademarks of Lucasfilm Limited and its affiliates. All original content of this podcast and website is the intellectual property of Tatooine Sons unless otherwise indicated.